So now it's time to do some more programming. So we've already seen the alert and the console log. Those are two basic functions that you can use when you start typing code in JavaScript. And you may be wondering, well, how do I know what to write to begin with? Like you've just written some stuff here on this screen, but how do I specifically start writing anything on JavaScript? And how do I know to use these functions? So basically, part of your learning experience will be learning some of these fundamental functions. That's what we call them. Alert, console log. This is stuff that people who start off programming just memorize. So you'll always have a console as part of your development environment. Actually, that's not true. Sometimes you may not have it if you're working with an extremely old browser. But for all modern browsers, you should have the console. And for pretty much since the beginning of time, the alert function has always been around. So for JavaScript. So these are your two checks and balances basically to make sure you have code running on JavaScript in your browser. Your browser supports JavaScript. If you're not seeing this stuff run, then you have a problem. But that said, the other stuff like learning further functions and learning how to write more programs comes down to two basic caveats. One, you'll have to memorize certain functions and know, okay, this is what this thing does, and this is why I use it. And the other is writing your own functions, and basically those functions are boiled down into various bits of logic that you yourself define. So we'll talk about that right now, actually. How do you go about defining your own logic? So I'm going to hit enter, and I'm just going to create a new line here, and I'm just going to comment out the alert because I don't want to see the alert show every single time. But I do want to see the hello just to make sure JavaScript is running for me. And next, I'm going to start off with the very basic, very basic component of JavaScript. If you ever want to start writing JavaScript and you want to do some basic logic, you want to use variables. And variables are your building blocks for writing code. Just think of it this way, like in math, there are unknowns, right? And so let's say you had an equation like x plus 3 is equal to 10. Well, in this case, what is the value of x? So the x value could be found by just subtracting 3 here from 10, and we know that x is equal to 7. So variables help us store values. And they also allow us to remember values for later. Values. So in computer programming, the thing that makes it so awesome is that you have the ability to remember stuff for later, even if you don't think you need it right now. So let's just go ahead and continue with this. So I have var x now. And this var keyword, we call it a keyword, see how it's highlighted in blue, allows me to create a variable that right now has no value, but let's just say that I wanted to make the value of x equal to this 10 minus 3. So then if I use my console, I do the same function here, console log x right now, and I save this page here, then I come back over here and refresh this page, I can inspect and go to console, and I can see that right under my hello is 7. So now the value of x is 7, as you guessed. So variables are an easy way to hold values that we can remember for later. For example, let's say I wanted to make another variable called y. I could say var y, and then I could say y is equal to x plus 2. So in this case, what would be the value of y? Well, if x is 7, 7 plus 2 should be 9. So y should be 9. So if I come back over here, make sure you save. and then refresh this page, you can see that the value of y is 9. And now we can make this a little bit easier for ourselves because like we have a whole bunch of stuff like sitting on the console like this. It's not very helpful. You can also add some what we call strings. And strings like not yarn strings, balls of strings or shoestrings. We call this string in programming language basically because if you think of a string like in real world sense, it's like basically like a bunch of cord together, right? Like it's a bunch of thread together, sewed together, and then that forms a string, right? So in the same way, if we put a bunch of characters together, that forms a text string. So if I said x is equal to, like this looks like a plain English sentence, but I can't write plain English sentences without these quotes, because if I do, I'll run into errors. It'll think that x is a variable, is a variable, equals a variable, to is a variable, and then it'll look at this colon here and it'll think, oh, I don't know what that means. Let's just save and see what happens if we do something like that. So if I come back and refresh, you'll see that I have an error and it's saying missing some parentheses after argument list. So if I click on the index 21, it'll say this is where my error is. So in order to fix this, in order for it to make sense to not only the computer but to us, we need to put the two quotes around this to indicate that this is a string, text string. Basically, just like a thread, like that is sewn together with multiple threads to form a string. In the same way, we put together a bunch of text characters, and that makes a full text string. So anyway, I'm doing console log as x is equal to, and then of course y is equal to, and space, and then if I save again, and I come back and hit refresh now, I come to the console, you'll see x is equal to 7, y is equal to 9. So this is more helpful for anybody kind of looking at our code and trying to understand, oh, this is what this thing does. So the key takeaways here are that we have variables which help us store information. That's what this really should say here. And then also this information can be remembered for later use. And then of course we have the ability to put English sentences together as text strings, which we can use to help us better understand our code and print out friendly messages. So I hope that makes sense. In the next video, we'll use more of this to do some more coding.